Did Chris Columbus say he wanted to stay home? No. What if the Wright brothers thought that only birds should fly? And did Galoka think the Ulus were too ugly to save?
Who's Galoka?
Never mind.
Listen, Centauri, I'm not any of those guys. I'm a kid from a trailer park.
If that's what you think, then that's all you'll ever be.
Greetings, Starfighter. You have been recruited by the Star League to defend the frontier against Zur and the Kodan Armada. Get ready? Prepare for blastoff.
You're listening to 91 Reasons, a journey into the twisted landscape of pop culture. Keep your hands and arms inside the podcast at all times. And now, the voice, Jeff Tucker.
You know, I remember going to the Universal Studios theme park for the studio tour, and one of the big attractions back in the day was the special effects stage. And for a film nerd like myself, like I think I've said it before, but I was obsessed with special effects in the movies. That was my career of choice when I was a young man. I wanted to build X-Wings and blockade runners and Millennium Falcons. I wanted to kit bash. I wanted to create, and you know, I did to some extent. I didn't have a lot of money growing up, but I did do kit bashing, which is where you take a bunch of model kits, you throw them all together, and you make something new out of them, which drove my mother insane because she was buying model kits for me in the hopes of seeing me build these spaceships and cars and whatever, tanks, and instead I was taking 3 kits and making one singular item out of it. So it was a little frustrating for her. The most amazing thing I ever did kit bashing was I took a 57 Ford convertible and used Return of the Jedi speeder bike parts to make it a flying car with, instead of wheels, it had the speeder bike sort of exhaust ports on the back. Like, it was really beautiful. I wish I still had some of those model kits. But, you know, when you move and you move and you move, things get lost and they're just gone. But sitting in that Universal Studios special effects soundstage and watching how practical effects were made, they did have an interesting thing on the tour for a while, and that was a computer screen would start talking to you and say how I am the future of special effects. I'm a computer, and I didn't want to believe it because I wanted to have a career. You know, I wanted to have a career in special effects. So watching a computer tell me that they're the future of special effects was kind of a slap in the face. And of course, the example that they used was the groundbreaking film, The Last Starfighter. The Last Starfighter was very polarizing when it came out because its effects are so bizarre for the time. Watching it last night, the effects are quaint, but you have to watch it with 1984 goggles. And oh my God, 1984 goggles? A film that only cost $14 million to make? It is an astoundingly good film. And there's a couple of reasons for it. Before I launch into this, I do have to thank Michael Bondi for his Patreon pledge that made this episode possible, and an apology, obviously, for it taking so darn long. But it happened right when I moved, and I'm still trying to find boxes of movies in the garage. So I actually had to order Last Starfighter off of eBay to make sure I had it. Because when is this the worst thing that ever happens to you as a movie file? You you stare at your, like, I have shelves of movies, obviously, and you finally like locate, because they're not in any order. I'm not. You can tell by the haphazard way I throw this show together that I am not a guy who keeps things in order. But when you finally find the movie that you want and you open it and there's no disc, and that means that the last time you watched it, I probably left it either in the player or on the TV, the stand, and my wife put it somewhere. So the last Starfighter disc that I had, the DVD, is gone. So I just went ahead and bought the Blu-ray. But again, Michael, sorry for the delay in this episode, but here we are. And I watched the movie last night again with fresh eyes. And let me tell you, for a movie that came out in 1984, now it only made $28 million, which at the time is a moderate hit. That's double its budget. If a movie can make double its budget, you've got a return on your investment. I don't know what Universal spent marketing it, but doubling your budget at the box office is healthy. It's not a mega hit, but look at what it was up against that summer. Karate Kid, Ghostbusters, Splash, Gremlins, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. There was a lot of stiff competition, but this is a time when studios were taking risks on original stories. And the last Starfighter, even though it does follow the hero's journey almost to a T, it is an original take on it. It's an original take on the King Arthur legend. And even the screenwriter himself cops to that. But that's okay. Because there are only, a dozen stories to tell. And it's the way in which you interpret it. And you know what? They have been trying to chase the originality of The Last Starfighter going on 31 years now. Can you think of another video game movie that's worth watching? Are there any? Are there any video game movies worth watching? Have we? People are going to probably point to, like, the Resident Evil movies are pretty good. The first one, at least. But they've been trying to use video games as movie fodder for a long time. For me, for my money, the best video game movie is a documentary, King of Kong, Fistful of Quarters. But that's because the story is so compelling. But if you're telling an original story, the idea of aliens planting a video game on Earth as a simulator of their war machine in the hopes of recruiting the best player, i.e. Starfighter on the planet, is completely brilliant. And the screenwriter uses it to its nth degree. And here's the thing, and this is what we're lacking in movies today. When you sit down to write a movie like The Last Starfighter, and you've been given a budget, and forget about the first draft, because I don't know if you know this, but the first draft of any movie, book, or whatever is called an ego draft. And you're supposed to just not edit yourself and put everything in it. Whatever you want to put in that ego draft, you throw it in. And you wait till the editing process to take it all out and streamline it and make it a better story and take out the stuff that detracts from the story. And the thing about a movie like The Last Starfighter is that when you're talking about 14 mil, at the time, a lot of money. What was minimum wage in 1984? $2? Think about that. Think about that. So when you're sitting down around the table and we're going to make this movie, the people at Lorimar, the people at Universal Studios, we're going to make this movie, we're going to give you $14 million. How are you going to spend it? And if you know that the special effects cost X amount of dollars, now if you've ever watched the making of Phantom Menace, Lucas doesn't care about this. He basically tells the special effects guys like John Knoll, we'll just figure out a way to get it done. And I love that can-do spirit. But that's fine if you're the guy controlling the purse strings and the special effects production company. But when you're having to hire all of these in, you have to make your shots count. And so, Last Starfighter becomes a really streamlined, well-done screenplay that saves all the fireworks for the end, but at the same time, not sacrificing the characters, the story, and the suspense, and most importantly, the action. And it has all that in spades. And really keeps you humming along so that you're not, A, inundated with way too many special effects at the beginning, all of it is saved for what it should be, the finale. So, The Last Starfighter opens. We meet Alex Rogan. He's a kid in the Starbright trailer park who's not going anywhere. It is a take on the Luke Skywalker story. We're substituting the desert world of Tatooine for the Starbright motor lodge, mobile home. But that's okay. That's really okay. Because again, it's all the heroes. It's King Arthur growing up in a village. It's Harry Potter living under the stairs. The difference here is that Alex Rogan will find out that he's not predestined. He doesn't have a predestiny to do something great. He wants to do something great. But he's not, he's not third in line to the crown. He's not a hidden wizard. He just happens to be good at a particular video game. And fate, not destiny, intercedes. In Star Wars, it's Luke's destiny to become a Jedi. His father is the most supreme evil being in the galaxy. Alex Rogan is just a kid trying to escape the doldrums of getting drunk on a Saturday night and having to go to City College. And when he finds out that his loan has been denied and he's not going to get to go, and his girlfriend's run off with somebody else, or so he thinks, he turns to the only outlet that he has, and that's the Last Starfighter video game. And in his frustration, breaks the record and gets the high score. And there sets the movie in motion, because when we find out that the game was placed there by Centauri it's hard to describe. Like, Robert Preston is so good as Centauri, even though I know he's just playing the Music Man. But that's okay, because he infuses Centauri with so much character and quirk and con man charm that we like him from the moment he steps onto the screen. And he drives up in a Ron Cobb designed vehicle car called the Star Car. Fantastic. One of the best of the 80s vehicles. And of course, there's always going to be a Back to the Future reference in the show, right? The Star Car shows up parked in Hill Valley 2015. Of course it does. It even shows up, I think, on a poster of the cars of 2015. Because 2015 Hill Valley featured not only a flying DeLorean, but the Star Car and the Blade Runner spinner, all painted differently. But Centauri explains what the game was intended for and whisks Alex up to Rylos to become a starfighter. And this is where I noticed that there are a lot of similarities between this film, The Last Starfighter, and another film that I really enjoy just as much, if not more, Galaxy Quest, where people who are embroiled in something that they believe to be artificial is revealed to them to be fact. And it even has a scene where everybody's speaking alien, and then they're given a translator. So there are a lot of similarities, but that's okay, because if you're telling good stories, it's okay to crib if you put your own spin on it. And we're given screenwriting 101 lesson, because Alex is shown what's at stake, who the bad guy is, and how bad he is. He meets his future best friend and co-pilot Grig, and the stage is set. But like any, normal person, Alex decides that risking his life seems crazy, and he just wants to go home. And Centauri, who has to give back the money in a Han Solo, fashion, what's in it for me? Centauri has to take him home. And two things happen at this point. And, the movie, again, like I said, it hums along, and it's funny, and it's exciting. And while Alex is gone, he's been replaced by a robot double played by the same actor, Lance Guest. And Lance, it's weird, Lance never really became a big star. He's been doing well. I looked up a lot of his credits. But this movie should have made him a big star. I mean, the movie is that good, and he's that good in it. Because not only does he play the starstruck wannabe fighter pilot, but he also plays the goofball wannabe human robot. And he does both parts very well. His girlfriend in the picture is Catherine Mary Stewart, who plays Maggie. Now, Catherine Mary Stewart was perfectly cast in this movie, because if you had to conjure up what the girl next door looks like, Catherine Mary Stewart is the poster child for that. Pretty, funny, smart. Did I mention pretty? Also shows up in the cult classic Night of the Comet, in the other cult classic Mischief, and the not so cult classic Weekend at Bernie's. But really one of the really talented actresses to show up in the 80s and then sort of fizzle out unfairly, because again, she's perfectly cast, does her job really well in this movie, and should have been a big star. This movie should have made $90 million at the box office. It's weird that it didn't. And I think if you had to pinpoint where it went off the rails, its strength is also its weakness. And that, of course, I'm talking about the special effects. Because if you don't buy into the special effects, if you don't buy when that star car takes off into the sky and turns into a 1984 era computer-generated image, then the movie falls apart. Now, see, I'm willing to go on that journey. I'm one of the dreamers. I would have got into Tomorrowland. I would have turned it down, but I would have got into Tomorrowland because I'm a dreamer. A dreamer. But the effects are strikingly different than anything that was on screen at the time. Everything at the time is done with model work and pyrotechnics and practical. And there's nothing practical except for the spaceship landing strut and obviously the star car that they get in and out of. Everything else is CGI as far as the vehicles are concerned. And when you finally do see the Gunstar, it's a beautifully designed, practical looking spaceship, even if it's not a practical created spaceship. Alex back home finds out that he's being hunted by bounty hunters, so he really has no choice but to go back and become a starfighter, because if he doesn't, the Zendozan bounty hunters are going to either kill everybody that he loves, or Zur and the Kodan Armada are going to breach the frontier and conquer Earth. So he really has no choice. But when he goes back, it's under the assumption that he's joining the Starfighter League, right? Now, what he doesn't know is while he's gone, the bad guy of the picture has breached the frontier and destroyed all of the starfighters and the pilots. They got everything right in this movie except the one thing that they had trouble with for years, and that's explosions with debris. Very hard to do in the computer. Something they only came up with within the last decade, I think. Because even as late as 96 with Twister, they couldn't do debris. It looks wonky. Everything had to be done minutia by hand. It's very time consuming, very expensive. So the explosions don't look very good, but everything else looks great. It looks the way it's supposed to look. The universe of The Last Starfighter has its own distinctive look, and I'm okay with that. So Alex arrives back, finds out he's the only one, and that there's only one ship left. It's the experimental one that can take a hit or two and has a secret weapon. So the stage is set for the big finale of the picture. And, it does not disappoint, because it's got a training mode, it's got subterfuge, it's got creativity, and everything comes together very well. And it does, again, follow the hero's journey very distinctly, because before they leave Earth, Centauri is shot in a last-ditch effort by the Zendozan, who I might add has his arm cut off, just like Walrus Man in the cantina. So again, there are a lot of Star Wars echoes, but they one-up it a little bit by having the Zendozan able to move his arm even though it's not connected to his body anymore. So Centauri is shot, and when they arrive back on Rylos, Centauri dies. Much the way Ben Kenobi dies before Luke has to face the Death Star by himself. And it is the hero's journey where the wise man who has guided our hero has to die. Gandalf has to die. It's just the way the story goes. It's interesting in that respect how they're all very similar. So I enjoy this sequence quite a bit. Grigg is such a good character, played very well by Dan O'Herlihy, who would show up a couple years later as the head of OCP in RoboCop, which is, it's funny because when I go to the movies, I love to recognize actors and then like, oh my God, that's Grigg from The Last Starfighter as the old man at OCP. And another really cool thing is that my friend Greg, not Grig, but Greg, actually ended up with Grigg's mask, the actual mask worn by Dan O'Herlihy. I'm sure there was more than one, but one of them, he had the full head foam latex appliance mounted on a display piece with eyes in it and everything. It was beautiful. And I remember just going over his house like, that's Grigg from The Last Starfighter. It really is him. So to be able to touch a piece of movie history like that in such a great character, such a really fun, like the way he laughs is so good. He has this wheezing laugh, and he just has, Herlihy infuses Grigg with such human emotion that you get that he's both looking out for Alex and prodding him to do better. Because Centauri's very blatant about it. If you think you're just a kid from the trailer park, that is all you're ever going to be. And that's a slap. Like, wake up, pal, and find within you. If you want to take a step outside, you got to open the door. And that's, that's good advice, Marty, Alex. That if you have a dream or you want to do something else, you have to make steps towards it. And that's the catalyst to get Alex off Earth and up to Rylos to fulfill not his destiny, but the promise of what he wanted to do with his life. So we get to see the Kodan Armada, and it's being led by a turncoat from the Rylos planet, the son of the leader of Rylos. And what's interesting is that the Kodan are the Kodan Armada and the Kodan themselves are presented as pretty good warriors with a good head for battle plans and war, and they're undone in just a few short scenes by this boob with his stupid scepter that has the knife that pops out. With he has in such short strokes, the writer is able to set up that these guys are fed up with this idiot, that they have no choice but to be with them, and that the idiot is leading with this bravado idea of showing up his father instead of with a military mind. But the Kodan realize this too late to get him off the bridge and launch their own attack. But it is an interesting dynamic at play, and one you wouldn't expect. You expect the villain to just be, I'm a bad guy and I'm doing bad things. But instead there's some fun interplay there, and I think that was put into place because the son does escape into an escape pod and is never seen from again, and it's kind of like setting up a pseudo sequel, but it never happened. But you can see, like, The Last Starfighter tells a complete story, the same way that Star Wars tells a complete story, but leaves a little bit open for a sequel if it's possible. It's not like today's movies where they just leave things completely unresolved and tell you to come back 2 summers from now to finish it up in the part 2, or in the case of the Marvel movies, another hero's movie. And that's a trend that's got to end at some point, because that gets tiring. Just end the story and then tell another story. The Winter Soldier doesn't make amends with Captain America or get captured. He's just not in the, he just rides off. That's irritating. At least Ultron was destroyed. Right? But The Last Starfighter does everything right because this is 1984, and instead of looking for franchises, we're just looking for good stories to tell. What a shocking concept. And thankfully, everybody involved in it was signed on board to tell a good story. And there are directors out there still trying to do that. And there are writers trying to do that. But they're undone by studio heads who don't want a singular well-done movie. They want 30. Now, what's weird about The Last Starfighter is that because it's a Star Wars clone, which I'm not saying in a bad way, I'm just saying it's in the same vein as Star Wars, and that's okay, because there were 100 of them. This just happens to be way near the top of them. But what's weird is that the studio must have gotten cold feet at the very end, at the very last minute, because there was zero merchandise except for a comic book. Oh, where are the toys? I can't believe in the 31 years since nobody's resurrected and made a toy line. I know that Tomy, I'm pretty sure it's Tomy, who had the Tron license, another computer-generated movie. Now the difference, if you're looking for the difference, Tron was first, but Tron's computer graphics are done to show computer graphics. The light cycles, the tanks, the tracers, the tanks, they're all computer, computer graphics portraying what they are, a computer. So The Last Starfighter is trying to portray reality. It's totally different, much more ambitious. And a lot of Tron was done hand animation, which is, buried under a lot of how to, what to. And there's no doubt that Tron's a strikingly original and great movie with really groundbreaking effects, but a lot of them were done practical. Anywho, why Tomy, who had action figure 2-packs mocked up for Toy Fair 83, 84, never got these to market. I don't know. I've seen the prototype pictures, and they would have made, Alex and Grig, the Zendozan, and the tentacled guy that Alex steps on, and a few other characters. It's just maddening that there's no toys for this movie. I would kill for a Centauri figure with the Star Car. That I love to bring movies home with me. And collectibles and toys are the way to do it. Well, there's not even a Hot Wheel of the Star Car. Nothing. All these great designs have never been realized as a toy. They were the Gunstars never been realized as anything, except there might have been a garage kit conjured up by somebody in the late 80s when garage kits were were very popular. If you don't know what a garage kit is, and I got into these for a while, garage kits were people who were very good at sculpting and creating, who would simply just make a model kit that didn't exist. Most of the time it was people, because you can sculpt people a lot easier than you can vehicles. But every once in a while you'd see a garage kit, or sometimes they would get something from the studio. Somebody somewhere would get a hold of a model off of a movie set or a TV show, and in the one day they had it, pull a mold off of it, give it back to them, and then run copies. And then those were sold as garage kits. And I used to buy them. They were really expensive. But it was the only way to bring home some of these characters that were never going to be made by traditional model companies. Now, that's all changed in the last 20 years or so. You can get a model kit of nearly any vehicle, from Galaxy Quest to... you can even get, very expensive, but scale models of even the Serenity. And the Serenity is another ship from Firefly that was never realized by the studio as anything other than computer. So we have come a long way, baby. But Tomy never got those toys to market. And man, I can't see why Reaction doesn't pick up Last Starfighter. They've got a relationship with Universal, having done Back to the Future and Jaws. So why they haven't picked up Last Starfighter is beyond me, because the designs are really striking. With Alex in his street clothes, his Starfighter uniform, Grig, Centauri, I'll buy them all, absolutely, as a way to recapture my fake nostalgia, because that's what it is, fake nostalgia. Nostalgia for toys that were actually never at market. But Last Starfighter ends, and it's really great. It's a very uplifting, positive. It's weird as I was watching it to think that if you made a movie like Last Starfighter today, you would get accused of schmaltz, cheese, and that's too bad. Because the schmaltz, the danger of the schmaltz moniker means that people don't make sweet movies anymore. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. There's nothing wrong. I mean, other than a little tiny bit of cursing in this movie, it's suitable for the whole family. And there's nothing wrong with making a movie for the whole family or telling a story that doesn't have to have any snark in it. You know, when they make movies like this today, Pixels, they have to be mean-spirited with people getting their hands chopped off and Adam Sandler snarking it up at every turn. Or, you know, a lot of violence. And I don't understand why that has to be. It's okay to make a movie where the problem at hand is the problem at hand, and they don't squabble amongst each other. They work towards a common goal. I've sat through The Martian twice in the last 2 weeks. It's that good, folks. And the reason I sat through it the second time is it's such an uplifting movie, and they're so rare these days. Interstellar was such a downer. Everybody wants to preach to you and tell you that Earth is doomed and we better get off the planet. Earth's a pretty good place, folks, and it's not going anywhere. You know, Alex saves the planet, and then him and Maggie get on the ship and take off for the stars. And that's their journey. And those back home are left with the knowledge that the planet was saved because the planet's worth saving from the alien armada, not from ourselves. The last shot of the movie is Alex's brother Lewis, who's provided some of the funniest moments in the film. Go back to sleep, Lewis, or I'm telling Mom about your Playboys. Fantastic. The last shot is Lewis playing the game as the Gunstar goes up into the heavens, and we see the promise of the next generation of starfighters who are going to take to the sky to protect Earth from outside forces. And isn't that a goal that we should be attaining? Working together to save the planet? See, I don't buy into the global warming nonsense. And that puts me at odds with a lot of people. But I happen to think that the planet's a good place, and it's been here a long time. And it's selfish to think that in the short time that we've become industrialized, we've somehow ruined the whole planet. I prefer to think positive. And that if we work together, we have a brighter future, but not at the expense of our living and our luxuries and our comfortableness. And I'm sorry to get a little preachy there, but Interstellar really leaves a bad taste in your mouth that completely is dissolved by both The Martian and this viewing of The Last Starfighter. A great concept to use a video game as a launching point. They've tried it many times, and it's never worked the same way that it has with The Last Starfighter. And I think that's because of simply the positive message of the film. It's such a positive movie that empowers you to. Sorry, Rachel came in there with some news, and I had to pause for a second. But well worth picking up on Blu-ray. And what's weird, like they've never done merchandise for it, but what they did do is, like I said, the comic book. And what's so frustrating is that the video game shown in the film never made it to the arcade. There was never a fully functioning Last Starfighter game for you to play at the arcade, which, that seems so ridiculous in hindsight. But apparently, I mean, it's even in the credits. Atari tells you to play the video game. But apparently at the last minute, Atari decided that the unit cost on those arcade games was going to be $10,000, and no one was going to pay that to put it in their arcade, which is weird because a few years later they'd have games that cost more than that, and they would just rent them to the arcade. The arcade wouldn't have to buy them. They would share the revenue. There were some really elaborate games put in the arcade, sit-down versions of this and walk-around versions of that. And, it's so maddening. But, Atari was going through, the doldrums after the E.T. fiasco. So they weren't in the best position to be the product tie-in for this. They didn't even have a home cartridge made for it. The Last Starfighter was a million possibilities and zero products to market. What a bummer. But what they did do, what did make it to market, was a 2004 musical, a stage musical based on The Last Starfighter. Now, I never saw this. It played off Broadway. I'm going to do some research and try to find some footage from it if it exists. But I did get it's on iTunes, the original recording of it, of all the songs. So you'll hear some of that at the end. But not the not the way you want to remember The Last Starfighter with some of this music. I mean, God bless them for trying. Anytime you sit down and try to be creative, it can go one of two ways. It can be a complete train wreck, or it can be a masterpiece. And Last Starfighter is somewhere in the middle, with tendencies towards train wreck. Just because it's, I don't know if that story lends itself to a musical. You be the judge by the short snippet I'm gonna let loose on you at the end here. But the idea of using the game as the training ground, which it's weird because the military ended up doing that anyways. The military uses video games today, the same way that they eventually started using video games to teach you how to drive. I remember the first time I sat down in a driving simulator, I was like, oh, this is like Spy Hunter without the missiles. And my driver's ed teacher was like, don't blow anything up, Tucker. But we're going to segue into Armada, the second novel by Ernest Cline, which is the same. Now, spoiler alert, if I didn't get it ahead of time, spoiler alert. Wait, before I get into that, I didn't even get into the Death Blossom. At the very end, the Grig and Alex activate the Death Blossom, which is a little God in the Machine, but I'm okay with it because it's new, it makes sense, and it's pretty cool the way the ship swivels and becomes like just an arsenal, and it's a really cool way of, instead of just shooting ships over and over and over again, instead we watch Grig on his monitor with the globe and waiting for all the ships to go into the sphere of influence of the Death Blossom, within range, and then they fire it. It's pretty cool. Really cool. And you know what? It's something that would never have been able to be done with model work. You would have had too many cuts. So it's one of those, and there are probably 30 shots in the film that you're like, well, they never could have done that at the time with a model. No way. Models just don't do that. You would have had cut, and it would have been choppy. The one thing that computer graphics allowed every artist to do was hold the shots longer, because everything's artificial anyways. But Ernest Cline, the author of Ready Player One, went back to the 80s stronghold again for his second novel, Armada. And this is a pretty polarizing one because it really is just a retelling of The Last Starfighter. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's okay to take a story and bend it backwards and forwards and make it your own. That's what everybody does. But, it really is The Last Starfighter. The same way that if you've ever seen Shia LaBeouf's Eagle Eye, it really is War Games, almost to a T. And then finally, when I watched the making of, they're like, well, it's our tribute to War Games. Well, thank you for at least admitting it. But Armada opens with a young guy sitting in high school class, and when he looks out the window, he sees a spaceship zoom by. So it tells the story from a different angle, because Zach, our main character of Armada, sees the spaceship and recognizes it as a ship from an online RPG game that he plays, like a Blizzard game. So we bring it into 2015, and it's not an arcade game, it's a game at home. And at first he thinks he's hallucinating. How could a spaceship from a video game be flying for real and doing dives and maneuvers that it shouldn't be able to do? And that sets into motion the Armada story, where Zach runs home and tries to look up his dead father's research on how the government was using a rare arcade game to recruit people to become starfighters. I mean, it's all very, very closely married to The Last Starfighter, with a dash of X-Files and conspiracy and people chasing a video game that may or may not have shown up and been downloaded and blah, blah, blah. And isn't it interesting that in 1984, Last Starfighter is released. There's no such thing as the internet. There's not even an inkling of it in the public sector. But the video game is talking to other computers wirelessly. It's transmitting. That's how Centauri knows to show up. So there are some lofty ideas. And Ernest Cline in Armada uses all of that and mixes them around in a pretty innovative way. And basically, Earth is invaded by ships from another portion of the galaxy, from another planet. I think it's Mars. I want to say it's Mars. It's a battle underneath Mars, and in underground, aliens are living there, and they're launching an attack on Earth. And Zach gets recruited. He works at a video game store. And his boss there turns out to be like a general in this army. And surprise, the game is real, Zach, and you're being recruited right out of high school, and the spaceship lands at high school. There's no attempt to hide it from the masses. Earth is under attack, and these kids are the heroes of the day. So Zach is whisked off to, I think it's Colorado, where there's a top secret base where he meets a punk rock chick, and he's briefed on how they're going to pilot these remote pilot ships. They're not going to send the teenagers out into spaceships to get killed. They're going to remote pilot them. And it's taken Earth, 30, 40 years to build this armada to fight the alien invasion. And when finally the Colorado base is destroyed, because Zach is a complete buffoon who does show amazing starfighter skills and does maneuvers that no one's ever seen before, he's transferred to the moon base, where he meets, surprise, his dead father, who was right all along. And him and his father have to fight side by side and, save Earth from the impending doom of the Armada's attack. And it's all done very well with good set pieces. It hums along very quickly. It's almost a real-time 24 type story, where it's like you're with him here, you're with him there. He goes to sleep, and now we're here, and now we're there, and now we're here, and ships are flying to the moon and back, and it's a good read. The problem is that I didn't buy the ending, and it falls apart at the end, and it's quite irritating. I won't give it away, because you're probably going to want to read it. It has echoes of Last Starfighter. You should want to read it. But suffice it to say that it borrows liberally from a really contrived ending that gives you your cake and eats it too, I guess. You get to have your cake and eat it too. Is that a good way to say it without giving it away? But I enjoyed Armada. I think I'm going to read it a couple more times to see if books are just like movies to me. Sometimes it takes a couple of perusals to really get into the story and not just race through it to see how it all turns out, but to slow down and enjoy the nuances of the writing and how the characters are moving about and getting from set piece to set piece and storyline to storyline, and not just a race for daylight of how everything turns out in the end. So check out Armada if you're a fan of Last Starfighter. If you've never seen The Last Starfighter, again, like I've said before in a lot of other shows, I'm totally jealous, because The Last Starfighter is brilliant. And it was a very good pick by Michael Bondi for the show. It's a perfect fit of 80s movie nostalgia, 80s video game technology that still holds up today, groundbreaking visual effects, good acting, good storytelling, good directing, that all comes together in a film that from 1984 still holds up today, is still being reissued today, and is one of those catalog titles that you'll still be able to find without special ordering. And that's the hallmark of a good movie. It also shows up on those 4-packs of, like, you get Flash Gordon, The Last Starfighter, and Enemy Mine, I think, is sometimes thrown in there too. And Enemy Mine, if you've never seen, with Louis Gossett Jr. and Dennis Quaid, another really good sci-fi movie from the same era. And Louis Gossett Jr. plays the Drac, which looks a lot like Grig. It's the same type of sort of lizard character. But another good film. I have to add that to the list. Enemy Mine's a great flick. But this is a time where, back in the 80s, they were taking risks on scripts. And once they took that risk and greenlit the movie, they would sit down and really hone the script to make the expensive special effects count. And that's how you got so many movies from the 80s that endure, that are still good today. The movies that come out today, the effects are so slapped together and so fuzzy and so cheap that movies come and go and you're not dazzled anymore. Because the effects are there to just assault your eyeballs instead of holding up the story, which is what they're there for. And I am just another voice in a sea of voices saying the same thing, that overuse of CGI is what's killing the movies. Take it all back. Tell good stories. The Winter Soldier had great effects and a great story that complemented it. It didn't have to be the Earth is going to break in half. It didn't have to be that. The Michael Bay movies don't have to be so assaulting on your senses. Tell good stories. Tell uplifting stories. Enhance the human condition is what movies are here for. Yes, a good sad movie has its place. I love being, taken away and made to feel emotional by a movie like Dances with Wolves or Schindler's List. But I also love uplifting movies like Last Starfighter that show us, and The Martian, that if we work together as a species, we can attain great things. And that fighting amongst ourselves is not ever going to solve anything. One very cool thing they had at San Diego Comic-Con was the publishers of Armada were there, and they actually had a recording booth where you could step in and read basically the first chapter of Armada. And what happens is they edit it together and they send it to you months later. So I stepped into the booth and I read Armada, the first chapter, and I was excited because I hadn't read the book yet. This is my first peer inside the cover, because the books that they had on display were just dummies. It was just the cover, not the actual book, because I would have just sat right there and read it while the guy stared at me. But I had a good time stepping into the booth and reading it. I only flubbed once, which was nice, and the good people at the publishing house were kind enough to send it to me, along with Will Wheaton's actual marketed version of Armada. So at the conclusion of the show, I'm going to play both of those for you. I'll play my version, and then I'll play Will Wheaton's actual version that you can purchase via iTunes or Audible or whatever platform that you're on. But Armada is definitely worth checking out if you're a fan of Last Starfighter. Thanks again to Michael Bondi for supporting this episode and for his patience in putting it together. It did take a long time. I look forward to watching Last Starfighter again. Like, that's the hallmark of good movies, is you watch it and you go, man, I forgot how good that was. I want to see that again. And how often do you do that about movies that come out today? The Martian's an exception, man. I watched The Martian, and I couldn't wait to see it again. But it could also have been the fact that about halfway through the movie, there was a man in the front row having too good a time with what looked like an alcoholic beverage, laughing and guffawing at the screen, and then turning to me 2 rows back and trying to get me to laugh Cape Fear style with him. And finally, he started yelling at the screen, trying to, I don't know, save Matt Damon himself? I don't know. But I had to go get help, and he ended up being escorted from the theater screaming and yelling the MFer and F you and F this. And for a moment I thought, this is it. This is how I end. I'm going to die in a movie theater. This guy has a gun. So I had to see it again without the pressure of death looming over me. So I did enjoy The Martian again. And you should too while it's on the big screen. And kudos to the writer of The Martian, who managed to turn his own self-published book into a hit movie directed by, are you kidding me, Ridley Scott? We all can dream. I can dream about my novels, The Sixth Key, The Lost Station, and The Infinite Backwards, somehow reaching critical mass and getting a movie deal the same way that The Martian did. I think his name is Andy Weir. Congratulations, Andy Weir, for showing everybody that a self-published book without the help of a major publisher can reach an audience big enough to get a movie made. Yeah, and obviously a good story, because The Martian is a great story. And it goes hand in hand with The Last Starfighter, of a single guy facing odds against, insurmountable odds, and showing the world that you can be a hero. So check them both out. Check out Armada. Check out our Patreon page. If you've got a movie that you'd like me to review, you can pledge, and I'll get to it sometime in the next millennium. Right, Michael? I'm sure Michael has 3 or 4 movies lined up for me already, which I can't wait, because he always makes great choices. Thanks for being a listener of the show. Thanks for listening and checking us out on iTunes and giving us a 5-star review. Check out my self-published books on Amazon.com. You can get them as a bound regular book, or as a Kindle for only 99 cents. You can get it on Kindle. The Sixth Key, The Lost Station, and The Infinite Backward. Coming soon, The Ice Temple. I am roaring along on that, and I cannot wait to share it with the world. I'll be heading out to Kamikaze on Halloween here in Los Angeles. If you're there, look for me in my 91 Reasons vest. I'm going to have some buttons. If you listen to the show, the 5 or 6 people listen to the show, hit me up for a button. I'll have them. But I love hanging out with you guys. Christopher, I didn't get to see you last night at Haunt. Things spiraled out of control, and I'm really sorry. I hope you and your dad had a good time, and that I can see you in the fog at some point in the future. Thanks to Doug Barnes and Robert Coker of the Season Pass for hanging out with me last Saturday for a marathon, getting their show together. I can't wait to see how it turned out. They got to hit all the mazes at Haunt and then talk to the people behind the screams. And if you haven't checked out the Season Pass, you should definitely check it out. It is the inspiration, one of the inspirations behind this show. So thanks to everybody out there who's listening. Thanks for people who've given me reviews. Thanks to whoever said on Podomatic, we want new shows, because I've been ill and I'm finally back in the saddle with 2 shows back to back. I am Jeff Tucker. I am the voice, and the show you're listening to is 91 Reasons.
For listening to 91 Reasons. Please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Find us on Facebook. Is anyone even still listening?
May the luck of the 7 pillars of Gulu be with you at all times. Oh, someday these cheapskates will thank Centauri, trust me.
Penguin Random House Audio presents an excerpt from Ernest Cline's Armada, recorded from the show floor at Comic-Con International in San Diego. We would like to thank all of our visitors for taking the time to record with us. For more information about Penguin Random House audiobooks and for free downloads, visit tryaudiobooks.com.
I was staring out the classroom window and daydreaming of adventure when I spotted the flying saucer. I blinked and looked again, but it was still out there, a shiny chrome disc zigzagging around in the sky. My eyes struggled to track the object through a series of increasingly fast, impossibly sharp turns that would have juiced a human being, had there been any aboard. The disc streaked toward the distant horizon, then came to an instantaneous stop just above it. It hovered there, motionless, over the distant tree line for a few seconds, as if scanning the area beneath it with an invisible beam, before it abruptly launched itself skyward again, making another series of physics-defying changes to its course and speed. I tried to keep my cool. I tried to remain skeptical. I reminded myself that I was a man of science, even if I did usually get a C in it. I looked at it again. I still couldn't tell what it was, but I knew what it wasn't. It wasn't a meteor, or a weather balloon, or swamp gas, or ball lightning. No, the unidentified flying object I was staring at with my own two eyes was most definitely not of this Earth. Of course, I'd never believed it would really happen. Even if alien visitors did decide to drop by this utterly insignificant little blue-green planet, no self-respecting extraterrestrial would ever pick my hometown of Beaverton, Oregon, aka Yawnsville, USA, as their point of first contact. Not unless their plan was to destroy our civilization by wiping out our least interesting locales first. If there was a bright center to the universe, I was on the planet it was farthest from. Please pass the blue milk and Baru. But now, something miraculous was happening here. It was still happening right now. There was an actual flying saucer out there. I was staring right at it. It was definitely getting closer. I could see its shape in more detail now. The saucer banked sideways for a few seconds, and I got my first clear glimpse of its top-down profile, and I saw that it wasn't really a saucer at all. From this angle, I could see that its symmetrical hull resembled the blade of a two-headed battle axe, and that a black, octagonal prism lay centered between its long, serrated wings, glinting in the morning sun like a dark jewel. That was when I felt my brain begin to short-circuit, because there was no mistaking the craft's distinctive design. After all, I had seen it almost every night for the past few years through a targeting reticle. I was looking at a Sobrakai Glaive, one of the fighter ships piloted by the alien bad guys in Armada, my favorite video game. Which was, of course, impossible, like seeing a TIE fighter or a Klingon warbird cruising across the sky. The Sobrakai and their Glaive fighters were fictional video game creations. They didn't exist in the real world. They couldn't. In reality, video games did not come to life, and fictional spaceships did not buzz your hometown. Implausible stuff like that only happened in cheesy 80s movies like Tron or War Games, or The Last Starfighter, the sorts of movies my late father had been nuts about. There was only one logical explanation for what I was seeing. I had to be hallucinating, and I knew what sort of people suffered from hallucinations in broad daylight without any help from drugs or alcohol. People who were cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, that's who. Cats with a serious marble deficiency. I'd long wondered if my father had been one such person, because of what I'd read in one of his old journals. The things I'd seen there had given me the impression that he'd become somewhat delusional near the end of his life. That he may have even lost the ability to differentiate between video games and reality, the very same problem I now seem to be experiencing myself. Maybe it was just as I had always secretly feared. The apple had fallen right next to the crazy tree. Don't do this, I pleaded with myself. Don't crack up now, when we've only got 2 months to go until graduation. This is the home stretch, Lightman. Keep it together. Outside the window, the Glaive fighter streaked laterally again. As it zoomed over a cluster of tall trees, I saw the branches rustle in its wake. Then it zipped through another cloud bank, moving so fast it punched a perfect circular hole through its center, dragging several long wisps of cloud vapor along with it as it tore out the other side. A second later, the craft froze in midair one last time before it streaked straight upward in a silver blur, vanishing from sight as quickly as it had appeared.
Penguin Random House Audio presents Armada by Ernest Cline. Read for you by Will Wheaton. I was staring out the classroom window and daydreaming of adventure when I spotted the flying saucer. I blinked and looked again, but it was still out there, a shiny chrome disk zigzagging around in the sky. My eyes struggled to track the object through a series of increasingly fast, impossibly sharp turns that would have juiced a human being had there been any aboard. The disk streaked toward the distant horizon, then came to an instantaneous stop just above it. It hovered there, motionless over the distant tree line for a few seconds, as if scanning the area beneath it with an invisible beam, before it abruptly launched itself skyward again, making another series of physics-defying changes to its course and speed. I tried to keep my cool. I tried to remain skeptical. I reminded myself that I was a man of science, even if I did usually get a C in it. I looked at it again. I still couldn't tell what it was, but I knew what it wasn't. It wasn't a meteor, or a weather balloon, or swamp gas, or ball lightning. No, the unidentified flying object I was staring at with my own two eyes was most definitely not of this Earth. Of course, I'd never believed it would really happen. Even if alien visitors did decide to drop by this utterly insignificant little blue-green planet, no self-respecting extraterrestrial would ever pick my hometown of Beaverton, Oregon, aka Yawnsville, USA, as their point of first contact. Not unless their plan was to destroy our civilization by wiping out our least interesting locales first. If there was a bright center to the universe, I was on the planet it was farthest from. Please pass the blue milk, Aunt Beru. But now, something miraculous was happening here. It was still happening right now. It was definitely getting closer. I could see its shape in more detail now. The saucer banked sideways for a few seconds, and I got my first clear glimpse of its top-down profile. And I saw that it wasn't really a saucer at all. From this angle, I could see that its symmetrical hull resembled the blade of a two-headed battle axe, and that a black octagonal prism lay centered between its long, serrated wings, glinting in the morning sunlight like a dark jewel. That was when I felt my brain begin to short-circuit, because there was no mistaking the craft's distinctive design. After all, I'd seen it almost every night for the past few years through a targeting reticle. I was looking at a Sobrukai Glaive, one of the fighter ships piloted by the alien bad guys in Armada, my favorite video game. Which was, of course, impossible, like seeing a TIE fighter or a Klingon warbird cruising across the sky. The Sobrukai and their Glaive fighters were fictional video game creations. They didn't exist in the real world. They couldn't. In reality, video games did not come to life, and fictional spaceships did not buzz your hometown. There was only one logical explanation for what I was seeing. I had to be hallucinating. And I knew what sort of people suffered from hallucinations in broad daylight without any help from drugs or alcohol. People who were cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, that's who. Cats with a serious marble deficiency. I'd long wondered if my father had been one such person because of what I'd read in one of his old journals. The things I'd seen there had given me the impression that he'd become somewhat delusional near the end of his life, that he may have even lost the ability to differentiate between video games and reality, the very same problem I now seemed to be experiencing myself. Maybe it was just as I had always secretly feared. The apple had fallen right next to the crazy tree. Don't do this, I pleaded with myself. Don't crack up now when we've only got 2 months to go until graduation. This is the home stretch, Lightman. Keep it together. Outside the window, the Glaive fighter streaked laterally again. As it zoomed over a cluster of tall trees, I saw their branches rustle in its wake. Then it zipped through another cloud bank, moving so fast it punched a perfect circular hole through its center, dragging several long wisps of cloud vapor along with it as it tore out the other side. A second later, the craft froze in midair one last time before it streaked straight upward in a silver blur, vanishing from sight as quickly as it had appeared.
Greetings, Starfighter. You have been recruited by the Star League and its leader Enderon to defend the frontier against Zor and the Kodan Armada. Level 8, Starfighter.
Look it, there's a Xander's hand, changing from a friendly man.
Look, there's more, they're changing back.
Watch out for a sneak attack.
50% life support, Starfighter. 75% firepower remaining.
Oh, Alex, no, Alex. Watch out below, Alex. Oh,
what a schmo, Alex.
Rev up and go.
oh, oh, oh.
Wow, what a pro, Alex. What do you know? What do we know? Little do we know right then what little do we know meant. Little do we know our world was changing this very moment. Little do we know this trailer park would not be the same.
All because of an outer space video game.
Centauri! I thought you were dead.
Me die and miss all the excitement? Oh, no. I was merely dormant while my body repaired itself. No, I won't bore you with the details. Suffice it to say, you're on Rylos, my boy. Stop thinking human. That's lesson number 1. Now, lesson number 2. You've got a good thing going here. Keep smiling. Don't blow it. Lesson number 3. Always trust Centauri.